Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Emma Jordan. I'm a community organizer here at Tech in Motion, and I am so thrilled to have you all and welcome you all to today's webinar. For those of you who have been involved in this community for a while now, you know that over 10 years ago, Tech in Motion was founded by staffing and recruiting firm Motion Recruitment with a mission centered around bringing the tech community together to connect, learn, innovate, and discuss the hottest IT topics of the day. Our community is always on the lookout for new event topics, passionate speakers, expert contributors, and more. So please check out the link that we'll drop in the chat for you to explore more ways to get involved following today's conversation. Also, you can follow us on all of our social channels so that you can be in the know for when we drop new events and exciting opportunities to get involved. Today, we are so excited to dive into an inspiring conversation with two exceptional startup CEOs. We have Rachel Koretsky, CEO of Upace and director of DC Startup Week, and Ian Swanson, CEO and founder of Protect AI. We are so excited to hear them share their valuable insights and takeaways into creating and scaling and everything in between for a successful tech startup. Don't forget to stay tuned today immediately following the conversation. So right at about 9:30 PST or 12:30 Eastern time, we will kick off some virtual networking. So we'll go ahead and open up a virtual networking room right here. It'll prompt you to join there, and you can go ahead and enter in and ask any remaining questions to our speakers, have a chance to chat with them, pick their brains a little more, and also meet other like-minded startup founders, CEOs, and entrepreneurs. Okay, so that's it from me. Now, without further delay, I'm so pleased to introduce to you our speakers for today. I'm going to bring them on stage and pass it over to them.
Thank you so much, Emma, for the introduction and bringing us together today. So hello, everyone. My name is Rachel Koretsky. I am the CEO of Upace and the director and co-founder of DC Startup Week. A little bit about my background. My company, Upace, we support community rec centers. We support around 1.4 million users across the United States and Canada of YMCAs, Jewish community centers, think government parks and recreation. A part of my entrepreneurial journey is being a sole founder in tech. Helped start DC Startup Week, which is the largest community of entrepreneurs and startups and founders in the DC, Maryland, and Virginia area. And we're getting ready for our big week this October, which we'll share a little bit more about as well. So Ian, if you could please introduce yourself as well.
Yeah. Thanks, Rachel. Thanks, Emma. Ian Swanson. I'm a CEO of Protect AI. This is actually my third company. And Protect AI is all about how do we secure AI and machine learning. And so our mission is we work with our customers to build a safer AI-powered world. The company is based in Seattle. I'm actually calling in, though, from Europe right now. So we do have offices in Berlin and Bangalore, as well as Seattle. And I've been in the AI and machine learning space for over 15 years. So prior to starting this company, I was the worldwide leader of AI at Amazon, so at AWS. But I really appreciate everybody's time. I look forward to getting your questions and in the back and forth that Rachel and I are going to have for the next 30 minutes.
Amazing. And what we want to encourage everyone to put any questions in the chat throughout. So our goal today is having a conversation around insights on how you scale a thriving tech startup. And we kind of get a background, if you put in the chat, where you're at in your startup journey. If you have an idea, if you're an early stage founder, if you're a growth stage founder, if you could share a little bit about what you're working on. And again, any questions throughout, anything you want more details or clarification on, please hop on chat, as this is an informative conversation that we want to have together. So let's get started and share a little bit about how you got started with Protect AI. Where did the idea come from?
Yeah. So as I said in the intro, this is my third company. I actually think finding ideas for a company is pretty hard. It's not as easy as maybe some people think. And so for this particular company, Protect AI, it was really rooted in what I had been doing before. And so when I was the worldwide leader of AI and machine learning at AWS, we had tens of thousands of customers, across 15 plus different services running AI and machine learning. And I saw security risks, that were there. And so this seems pretty, linear in terms of like, oh, okay, somebody sees a problem, they start a company. But but it's not always that easy. Yes, the theme was there, like we should have security for AI, but the specifics of what that means, that took a little bit of time. That took time of interviewing potential customers, finding my team, to really kickstart the company. But again, the beginning of the story was knowing or building in a space that I already knew, building in a space that I knew that there was a problem that needed to be solved.
So how did your early days maybe get easier or harder? As you shared before, you had 2 companies prior that you've exited out of. So how did that kind of help prepare you for now this third startup that you're working on?
Yeah. So I'm going to date myself. My first company was in 2007, and I sold that company to American Express. It was in the fintech space. The second company, datascience.com, I started in 2014, and that company exited to Oracle and now Protect AI. So those are the 3 companies. In terms of like how this has gotten easier, I think there's a lot of lessons that you learn across the journey, and some of those are, hey, you need to make sure that you validate your idea early. So I'm all about launch, get it out there, validate it, iterate on it. And if you need to, even pivot. Maybe we'll talk a little bit about what that means. But it's really understanding these kind of playbooks that helps you get going fast. I also know, for me at least, it's good to build with co-founders. I've always had companies where there's been 3 of us co-founders, oftentimes with different skill sets and where we can really specialize and grow the business. And then over the years, just the importance of building a team and building your network out. And so I think the number one thing that has gotten easier for me over the last 15, 20 years is that my network continues to expand. My network of investors, to people that I can work with, to even, services, my lawyers, the accountants, all of that stuff. And so I think if you're a first-time founder, it's network like relentlessly. It's really, really important to build up that network.
I love that. And one of the things that you hit upon is like you found finding co-founders in your team to be so important as a part of the journey. And you mentioned like always kind of having the 3 with different skill sets. So can you talk a little bit about how did you find those co-founders? Like, did you know them before? Did you search them out? And how did that relationship begin? And maybe if you could share a little bit about how does equity work in those early days like that?
So my first company I had, I was pretty early in tech. I left telecom, decided I wanted to get into a whole new space, whole new industry. So where did I meet my co-founders? I met them at a meetup.
Wow.
And I actually think that's a place that is really important to network, especially the early days, because you'll be able to go to these meetup events where people are passionate about the same subjects, the same themes, the same topics that you are. Now, I'm a pretty good generalist. Like I'm decently deep on technology. I can go very deep, on business, on operations, on sales. And so for me, I've always looked for co-founders that can augment the skills that I have and perhaps go deeper. So I've always had a technical co-founder, and I've always had a co-founder either that's focused on operations or focused on sales, on that. On the equity piece, there's some challenges that are there. Meaning I've learned some lessons. The first company, all 3 of us were equal partners. That comes with a little bit of pain. The last or the 2 companies I had after that, it was good to have a person that had a little bit more equity and made it clear in terms of decisions, but still trying to work as a committee, but have some decision power. So I've always had it where it hasn't been 33, 33, 33 in my, my last or my past 2 startups. But, these are people that I trust. In my last 2 companies, these are people I've worked with for 6, 8, 10 years. And so we know each other really, really well.
That's amazing. Thank you for kind of sharing that journey and insights. And from the poll of kind of who the audience is, the room of folks who filled it out, we're about like 50% of like the ideation and the planning stage. The next kind of sector, people focusing on scaling and growth, and some folks who are in the exit phase, as well as seeking the first round of funding. So that kind of goes into our next session around like you've raised, significant funding over, your journey throughout the 3 companies that, you've built and grown. And can you share a little bit around how did you start securing funding? Talk through about that journey and how you done, if it's angel investors, venture capital, some of the differences between the two and any recommendations that you have.
Yeah. So I've raised over $200 million probably in my career. But it's over many different rounds, different size companies, all of that. Like Protect AI itself has raised $111 million so far. I would say there's differences in my first company to the company I've had now. My first company, I had to knock on every single door I could, with VCs. And the thing that was really important, the first company, when I didn't have a track record necessarily that they already knew, I hadn't sold a company, hadn't worked at a massive company running a big business, was, really come at them with a product, a prototype, an MVP, that they're able to really understand how we're thinking about the problem and start to see a solution there. I'm not saying that you have to have a ton of customers, but you have to show that you can build something. And so that was really helpful in the first company. Plus, when I went and I met with some of those early investors, those angel, those Series A investors, they did hear about me from others in the community. In fact, I don't want to go back to it, but they heard from me from people that I would meet at these meetup events, on that side. And so I would go in and I'd meet with the investor for the first time. They would say, "Oh, actually, and we've heard about you from 3 or 4 other people." And so that was really helpful. Fast forward to this company is a little bit different. I've had 2 prior exits. I run big businesses. It wasn't as hard to raise money. But the difference, what I had to do in this company is I had to be diligent with my time. I didn't need to go out there and talk to 50, 80 different investors. I actually didn't want to. I didn't want my story to get out there too much, because I'll be perfectly honest with everybody on the call. When you talk to investors, I don't want to say IPs out there, but that message gets spread out there, of what your company is going to do, what you're building. And so just be cognizant of that. They don't sign NDAs, but if you need to keep something a little bit in your back pocket until later, go for that, do it. And then break ties with VCs fast. If they're not making a signal that they're going to invest in the first meeting, 2 meetings, stop, back away and start going down a different path. You're just going to be wasting your time.
From the 3 startups, have you had any repeat investors that you worked with across the 3 different ones, or every time were you finding new funders?
I have had some repeat investors, yes. For example, my company datascience.com, one of my lead investors was a group out of Utah called Pelion. I love Chad, the partner there. You want to find an investor that you could just pick up the phone and just call, ad hoc, that you're not afraid to have hard conversations with, that they are not afraid, of having hard conversations with. And Chad was one of those people. And so when I started Protect AI, he was one of the first calls that I made, and was like, "Hey, let's figure out how we can work together again." But actually, this company, Protect AI, one of my largest investors and the earliest investor, was somebody that had not been an investor in my prior 2 companies. But it was somebody that I have built a relationship with over the last 10 years. And so when it came time for this company, I was able to go back to them and I'll say, "You know what, Ed and his firm Bold Start, I think this company kind of fits within your thesis." And we're able to sit down, we're able to whiteboard together. We did it in something we actually call inception. So inception investing, not even seed, where you don't have your founders, you don't, have a product. You might not even have a PowerPoint, but you have an idea. And that's where I was able to work with Ed at this investment group called Bold Start and really start to build up, if you will, the foundations and the pillars that would become the business. So to go back to your question, yes, I've had repeat investors, and there's multiple examples of that, but I've also had new investors. But these are still people that I have at least known, or that, friends of mine have, worked with them as board of director members or investors within their companies.
I love that, because it shows that importance of it. But as you mentioned before, just your network, going to meetup events, getting yourself out there. And even if you said that investor you have now didn't fit the thesis of your prior company, but you never know where 10 years later, right, where that relationship should bring. And that's something that I always share with the startup community we have locally here, and talks just the importance of getting yourself out there. And just you never know where that relationship could bring, or the connection that they might be able to have. So always be, open-minded with that.
Yeah. Rachel, like real quick on that.
Yeah.
Why am I doing this meeting right now? Or like this podcast, this event? It's for networking. Like I don't know who's on the other side listening. Maybe there's customers there. I kind of don't, think so. But, these are individuals that will hopefully LinkedIn me, maybe we meet up for coffee, and you never know what's going to happen, there. And so it's been really important for me throughout my career to build out that network, build out those people that I trust, and the people that I can add value, but they can also add value into my companies.
Yeah. And exactly. You never know. Like one of my stories when I was starting out my company and I had a vision to be at, YMCAs. At that point, we're working very much with universities. And I pitched the product at like a demo event in Philadelphia. And an attendee in the room came up to me and was like, my YMCA needs your technology, made the connection. And that was our door into the YMCA market. Now we have over 100 YMCA clients on our platform. That was about 6-7 years ago. But it was just like that random moment of that one member of that center. So that's why you never know of who's in the audience and who's in the room of where that can lead.
I'll plus one that with another story. My first company, when it was eventually acquired by American Express, I found out that one of the leaders of American Express was going to be in San Francisco, and I had not met with him before. We had exchanged some LinkedIn messages, but I was like, can we please get together? And he's like, well, the only time I have is if you happen to be at the airport. I took a flight from LA to San Francisco just to go sit in the airport and meet with him, and we had some like terrible meatballs and a beer and sat down and had a conversation. And then 9 months later, it turned into like a M&A discussion. And then a year later, like acquisition, and you have to work hard, to network, but there's a lot of value that can come from it.
100%. Well, let's, pivot and talk a little bit about pivoting and what does that look like as growing your companies? And can you share I sometimes entrepreneurship and being a founder is sexy in a lot of ways, but it's also extremely, extremely hard and challenging of going through like the journey, making hard decisions, going through hard moments, having big successes and wins. But can you share a little bit about what have been some of your challenges along the way or setbacks that you faced, and what were they and how did you overcome them?
Yeah. So I would say startups are just really hard. Period. It's really hard on the founder, on the CEO. Being the CEO of a startup is a very lonely job, a lonely position. You're shouldering a lot of responsibility. And many times you're making it seem like everything in the world is great and good, because you're worried if you're not putting that out there, maybe you won't get customers or investment and all of that. So it's a very stressful position. Now, to your question of, pivoting, all three of my companies have pivoted slightly from the original idea. And the thing that I have learned is you need to dive deep into the data. You need to work backwards, from the customers. You need to establish that product market fit as fast as you possibly can, but you need to learn fast from failures and not be afraid to make a change. Now, the fortunate thing I've had in all three of my businesses is that they've been rooted in data. They've been rooted in signals that we've had. And so I've been able to make these calculated bets as we've needed to pivot. But it could be challenging. It also is very challenging for the team. So in order to make it successful, if you're going to go through any potential pivots and stuff, you need to start with transparency on day one. You need to talk to your team about the things that are working, but also things that perhaps aren't really at the bar that we thought that they were going to be. Maybe customers aren't liking a particular feature or product that's built. And you got to work closely with that team to be able to figure that out. If you're not transparent from day one on this stuff, and then all of a sudden you pull the rug and you say, actually, that product that all the engineers spent 9 months or 12 months building, we're shifting from that. They look at you and they go, wait a minute here. Can I trust you? Is this next thing going to work? But if you're along that journey together, looking at the metrics, talking to the customers, it can be a lot easier. And it makes it a little bit less lonely being the CEO if you're able to really bring up the team with you throughout that entire experience.
I love that. And how did you find, like, when you're building a team, like, what was the way that you went about it? Like, what type of people were you looking for? how did you build out that culture of an organization to be transparent and to really have that team culture where you could have those conversations?
Yeah. So a couple responses to that. So who am I looking for and where do I find these people? Initially, it's from, the people that I've worked with, my past. It's been the easiest place to go for, talent and people, that I trust. And then I recruit on LinkedIn, and elsewhere. Like I think every CEO needs to be, recruiting. Every CEO needs to be taking out the trash. Like there's no job below a startup CEO, and you need to set the example, for that. The other thing that I would state is, what am I looking for in the people that we bring on the team? Number one, good human beings. Number two, like exceptional talent, like everybody that is just better than me, for sure, on that. But it's really rooted in the first one. Like you got to be a good person, and you got to be somebody who like fits into the culture that you are building. And every single culture is slightly different, on that. On the transparency piece, like that's a little bit more of a tactic. And so at our company, as an example, every board meeting that we have with our board of directors, again, we came from Amazon, so we write a 6-page document. We share that document with the entire team, like days after the board meeting. And the entire company reads that. The entire company writes feedback, questions, comments within that doc, and we answer all of it. And it allows, whether you're a designer, a back-end engineer, to customer success, to office management, everybody is on the same page at that point.
I love that. And I love that 6-page, document piece of it. Cause I'm sure it's like that takes time and a lot of work, but like from the long game, like that's where you really see the benefit, where the whole team is a part of building the company, right? And being a part of that journey, which is so crucial and important.
On the 6-page document, this is kind of funny. When I was at Amazon, it's one of the biggest culture shocks when you go into Amazon is it's a writing culture. I had not written a document, a memo, a thesis paper since university days. And I was quite far removed from that when I started at Amazon. And it's definitely one of the quirkier things when I would be interviewing people that would be coming into Amazon. They'd be like, hey, what do I need to know? And it's like, you're going to be writing, and it's difficult writing. But it's something that I learned to love. I actually hated it in the beginning, but I'll tell you why. Like, here's the quick secret. When you write a PowerPoint, let's say for your board of directors, you're telling a story slide by slide by slide that they don't have full context until the very end. And so the conversation is one that is just, again, not rooted in the foundation maybe of everything that is going on. They're asking pointed questions from slide 3 to slide 8 to slide 33. Yeah. Where in the document side, you write a 6-page narrative, everybody is quiet for 30 minutes. They read the entire document, and then you have the most meaningful conversations. And it is something that it's a tool that we use that has been incredibly valuable for our board, but also just for our team.
I love it, because we would never think that. I think a lot of times startups, we move fast, like always on the go, that you don't necessarily take that step back to write something like that. But I love it now. Now I'm thinking about how we could start doing things like that in our organization as well, and maybe taking that little snippet back to my companies. Well, the next thing I want to talk about, as we have people in the room who are, just getting started, people who are fundraising, people who are trying to scale. What would be some of the advice that you would share with them? And if you could hit a little bit on like each part of where their journeys are at, that either you wish you knew when you were in that stage, or something that you kind of always share with yourself, every day along your startup journey.
So I think we spoke a little bit about, getting started, inception, finding the idea, build a product quickly, iterate fast. So that's like the early stage. But let's talk about, companies that might be Series A, Series B, and then maybe companies that are more growth stage. So on Series A, Series B, you're just starting to get customers, on that side. And then you're trying to figure out what are the levers of the business that you can pull to be able to accelerate growth, on that. Those levers could be things like how you're testing various ad campaigns. So how are you getting users in the funnel? How do you maximize people as they go through the funnel from marketing qualified leads to sales qualified leads to closed opportunities.
Yep.
And so it's within Series A, Series B that I spend a lot of time about optimizing every single step of our business in a way that we can start to put metrics against and be predictive, on it. And it's different, for a lot of companies, but it's really important that you have those things answered, that you know what those are, so that when you go for growth for later stage, you're able to say, look, if I spend $1 million or $5 million more here, I know I'm going to be able to make $10 million. And that's when you know that you have a business that can truly, truly scale. Now, across all three, stages, whether it's early, if you're in the middle, if you're towards the end, I will say you got to be incredibly financially disciplined, on it. In my second company, we raised a lot of money when we weren't really expecting to raise that amount of money early. We hired too fast. Like, I made a mistake, on that. We thought we were getting product market fit. We thought we were having the right signals. We hired a little bit too quickly, on that. And so what I've learned is, just to back up a little bit, on it, and make sure you are incredibly financially disciplined. Normally, investors, when you go and you raise money, you'll have about 18 to 24 months of cash. I always push for more cash. I'm willing to give up more equity to raise more cash. Yeah. There's two things that I have learned, in the last 15 years working with the same lawyer that I have. My lawyer from Oric has worked with hundreds of other startups. And I remember an early conversation with him. His name's Greg. And he said, Ian, I've never had a company that has said I've raised too much money, but I've had a lot of companies that said I raised at too high of a valuation. And that's a really big and hard lesson sometimes to learn, because all the time you read stuff in TechCrunch of oh, this company raised at a $500 million valuation or some big one. Who cares? What really matters is that you have the right amount of capital to meet your goals, whether your goals are to get to the next round or if your goals are to exit. And I'm willing to give away more equity in order to be able to hit those goals. The biggest issue that I've seen on the C stage companies, I was talking to one yesterday, and I was like, how much are you looking to raise? And they were saying, well, we're looking to raise, somewhere around $10 million. I was like, okay, what's your valuation? Well, we're going to try to get 100 million. It's like, wait a minute, why 10%? That's insane for an early stage company. They're like, well, we don't want to give away too much equity. Who cares in the beginning? It will come back around. You want to make sure you have the right cash. You want to make sure you have a valuation that makes sense. If you have too high of a valuation, you might not get other investors to invest. You might not have companies that will be able to acquire you. So I'm all about maximize the cash, and keep valuations in a sensible spot, and not be somebody that needs to hold on to equity as if you're not going to be able to get upside later. You always can. Every single one of my exits, despite the equity I had, I've always looked at it, and so have my teams, is this was a positive across many, many different aspects, whether it's money, resume, the jobs that they've gotten, the salaries on it. It's always been a win.
I love that. Well, with that, we're right out of time. I know there was one question in the chat from you, Eric, but afterwards here, we have a 30-minute networking time as well. And just, Ian, for you to know, that question might come up was, what do you think is the biggest challenges for startups today? Which could be a really great conversation to start within the next segment of this event. But Ian, before that, how could any of the attendees reach out to you if they have any additional questions or want to connect? What's the best way?
I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. It's pretty easy to find me. Just search, Ian Swanson. If you do try to add me, LinkedIn has it has a cap of 30,000 people. So I have to delete people to add people, but please, try to connect with me there, send me messages, more than happy. Plus, my company has a community called mlsecops.com for machine learning security operations. And we have a Slack community, and I'm regularly in that community as well.
Amazing. Well, thank you, Ian, for so much of your time, your insight, sharing your honest journey of what you've kind of been through across 3 startups, raising over 100 million. I think you said 200 million total across the 3, and really scaling and focusing on Protect AI right now. So we really appreciate your time, your energy, and all your support for the founders and the startups in the room.
Thanks, Rachel.
Yeah, thank you so much, both of you, for participating. That was such a wonderful and insightful conversation. We really appreciate it. So let's go ahead and keep the conversation going. In just a minute here, I'm going to prompt everyone to join virtual networking room. It'll pop up on your screen, so you don't have to go anywhere else. It'll pop up right here, and we can continue this conversation and also have a chance for everyone to ask more questions. I saw a couple trickling in, so we'll move those over to the next portion and pick up right there and get started on some Q&A. Also, we popped in the chat, be sure to RSVP for our upcoming Timmy Awards. I think we mentioned that Protect AI is actually in the running for our Best Tech Startup Award. So you can tune in live on September 26th to see if they take home the trophy. So RSVP for that. And then I'll see you all over in the virtual networking room in just one moment.